Here I am with George Porter, uh, who's a lead singer in a Simple Minds tribute band, Simple Minded, and also uh, produces, sings his own productions. Uh, we've known each other since 1980. It's been a long time since we've actually met when we both lived in Livingston. I think I moved away first. How are you, George?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm good, Roland. It's nice to see you. I know we share a Facebook page, and I always see what you're up to, and your all the sort of diversity that you have artistically. So that always piques my interest. But no, I'm good, and I'm still in Livingston. Although I've left and come back and left and come back, I'm on that sort of come back thing, and I've been here for a little while. Not so far from where you lived in Harburn Avenue, and I can still remember where you lived, and I could probably walk there in 15 minutes from here.
Because we moved up in 1978, and Harburn Avenue was just the one block that we lived in. So there was about 12 houses that were built, and the rest of it was just a building site. The bottom houses
Yeah,
near that main street there was no houses there at all. But it was just our 12 houses and nothing else apart from shelves. So it was quite an interesting experience to move into a building site, and I suppose it was quite
mm,
exciting in 1978 because when you moved there in 1980, you lived on the scheme beyond us, didn't you, in Lenzie?
yeah. We did. God, scheme's such a 70s word, isn't it? My goodness, you wouldn't hear MD in Livingston say the word scheme now, but and it was only a short walk as well from for my mum and dad's house to where you live with your parents and your sisters. I think it was maybe 5 6 minutes, but it was on the way to school. And like I think when we moved into our house, Harburn Avenue was complete, and Lindsay Avenue was just about to be completed when we moved in. It was February 1980. I can still remember it. I can still remember driving down the street and all the mud from the tractors and the diggers, and they'd been in and out the street, and thinking, what have we done here? But it was February 1980. Little did I know what was ahead of us from that moment on, because it kind of changed the direction in our lives um, in a way that we couldn't reverse, and we didn't want to. It was an amazing time for us to move, because when we lived in Clydebank, we lived in a block of eight, and we were on the top floor. To move to a house that had a back and front door and a back garden was it was a new world. I know it might sound a bit dramatic, given where we are today in 2022, but for us, it was an amazing adventure, and we were really excited by a new school as well. So yeah, and it's been exciting knowing I'm coming on here today to reflect back and think about that period in time, which I haven't really thought very much about in my life, really, until I spoke to you the other day in Glasgow City Centre about this potential podcast.
Yeah, yeah. Because I remember when you moved through, because you got two brothers, two twins, Scott and Alan, and
Yeah,
they
yeah.
were both in the same year as me. So I've got a feeling you're 2 years ahead of me.
I'm 50. Yeah, well, I'm 3 years ahead of my brothers,
Okay.
so I'm 3 years ahead of them.
But in school terms, was that not 2 years? I'm just trying to
No, no.
remember.
Well,
Were
I
you in?
think
Sorry, were you in my sister Jan's class or year? Sorry, not class, year.
do you know what? I don't remember, because I was at Dean's High School for such a little time.
Yeah,
We moved there in February, and I left that summer.
right.
I was 15 when I moved.
Yeah,
I was 15 going on 16. I was going to be 16 a few weeks after we moved into Lenzie Avenue, and my brothers they were going to be 13.
Yeah.
So, it was quite an important time, and particularly in my life, you know what I mean, for that sort of schooling sort of thing and changing schools at that moment in time. But yeah, we were at that age where we were still quite impressionable, and we're better to be in Livingston, really.
I mean, it was there was certainly a lot happening. So in the first I heard of Livingston was 1978. You know, before when my dad said, "Oh, there's an opportunity up in Scotland. We might move up there as a family," and he took us up on a train trip to Edinburgh, and then a journey through to Livingston, and we saw the school as it was going to be built, and we were then taken down the shopping centre, which was the focal point of Livingston at that time, and the trim track, which was near the river.
Yeah.
Before we went back,
yeah, I remember that.
We all had a family vote, and we all agreed that it would be a good move for the family to move up to Livingston, which we did in the summer of '78. And I remember particular, kind of like, you know, it's probably the worst time, and possibly because Scotland had qualified for the World Cup. So I was all excited thinking Scotland were going to win the World Cup, and I was moving to Scotland. And I remember watching all the 3 games, wanting Scotland to win, and by the third game, I was a bit dejected. You know, even though they won against Holland, it was a bit of
you know what? I'm not sure if I quite believe you on that, but I'll take your word for it. So,
no, that's the truth. I had because I've been writing about kind of like 1977 in particular, and I had a Scotland World Cup top, which I wore all the time. And then I moved up to Livingston in August of '78, and within a day, that Scotland World Cup top never came out of the drawer again. You know that. It was probably.
And you know what?
I never wore it after that. You know, but I never got myself an England top. I just went. That's it. I'm not wearing it. You know.
Well, I think in terms of football tops sort of heritage, that has to be one of the best world football Scotland strips ever, with the diamonds down the sides and the badge and the whole thing. It was Umbro that made it. And that was an amazing time. It wasn't such a great World Cup for Scotland, but they had a good team at the time. They had really good players, and I remember that well. I remember going to watch that when we were in Clydebank with my dad's friends, and how deflated everyone was when they get when they get beat off. What do you call it? Peru.
Yeah,
and it was really, really deflating. And then, of course, the glorious failure with Archie Gilmore scoring the best goal, one of the best goals of all time in the World Cup in '78 against Holland.
Yeah.
It sort of typifies Scottish football, to be honest. You know what I mean? They do it when it doesn't matter, kind of thing. Although I think the new sort of breed of players they have at the moment seem to be doing okay. But at that time, you're talking 1978 when you're a kid. Football, like me and my 2 brothers, that was the single most important thing in your life.
Yeah,
was playing football, because when we stayed in Clydebank, there wasn't Dean's Community High School, there wasn't green spaces. We lived in a block. Like I say to you, there was 8 in the block, and then there was another 6 blocks along the side of us, and then there was another block in front of us, and another block in front of that. And we found all through that sort of the formative part of your time being brought up in Clydebank, we just played football all the time because there was nothing else to do.
Yeah.
And we played football, one of these sort of things where you would go down the park on a Sunday and you would play 20 a side, and you were playing against guys who had beards when you were like 8 or 9 years old. You know, guys, who were men, who were apprentices, who were married, who had kids, and they would come out and play football with you as well. And they would kick the fucking shit out of you as a little guy. Do you know what I mean? So it kind of shaped you in many ways. And yeah, when we came to Livingston, it was nothing like that. It was a completely the culture was completely different.
Yeah,
The Newtown culture was significantly different from what we'd come from at the time. We didn't realise that. We didn't recognise that there'd been a change. We just knew something was different, but we couldn't put our finger on it. But like I said, on reflection, when you look back, you just go, "Wow, what a huge cultural shift we took on board as kids." But kids are good at doing that, aren't they? Like
yeah,
you were talking about, you had a family vote, you came up because as kids, you'll adapt to anything. I
yeah,
think as parents, we worry too much and about this, about how it's going to influence or affect them. I don't think. I think kids are just the most adaptable people out of us all. They're so good
yeah.
at adapting to circumstances. And Livingston was just like we couldn't believe it. We couldn't believe we had a school that had bits of grass you could go and play football, and we had a school that was open till 9 o'clock at night that you could play five-a-side football. The swimming pool was open, and it was on your doorstep. You could walk there in like 12 minutes from the house. But when we were in Clydebank, that didn't exist. Clydebank was an industrial town, a shipbuilding town, and it had local baths, swimming baths. Which do you remember the Bathgate baths? Do you remember
Yeah,
them, Ro?
yeah, yeah,
They
yeah,
were they were very similar to them. So they had wash houses in them where women could go and wash their clothes, for the family. They
yeah.
had big giant baths and showers in where men could go and have a bath at the end of their working week because there was no baths or showers in the house. And that was the kind of place where we come from. And we came through to Livingston, it was all new, shiny, full of new ideas, full of ambition. Really, I think, in reflection, and it was full of ambition. The town planners and where their foresight was quite remarkable, and it's living out. We see it now. Certainly now when I've come back, we see it. This is going to sound like I'm really old, but you see it in the trees and the way they've laid out the trees sort of thing, and everything's so green and lush and beautiful. But when we moved there in the beginning, like you were talking about in 1978, there was no greenery. It was it
Yeah.
was it was it was concrete and muddy streets, and there was nothing there. But now it's all filled in, and yeah, I think it's turned out to be a great place for people to come and bring their families up.
So
I really do.
when did uh, when did you first hear about the opportunity of moving to Livingston? When did your parents first mention it?
Well, I don't want to get too political here, but Maggie Thatcher and the Tories, who I fucking hate with a passion, all right, played a huge part in us moving and lots of other people moving in Scotland because the sort of deconstruction of the manufacturing base had started, and it was all related to they want to privatise things, to the sort of unions that were causing huge strikes, and I get that as well. But people like my dad and my mum had pledged their life to believing what the government was said that they were going to deliver, and in the end, they didn't. In the same way that everyone's feeling the pinch at the moment with the gas and electricity and fuel prices. But my dad had worked in the Singer sewing machine factory in Clydebank, and the Singers had decided to pull out of Clydebank in the 70s, late 70s. And my dad, through his contacts, had managed to secure a job in the Levi's in Whitburn. So my dad had left Singers and was commuting between Clydebank and Whitburn every day, and then had contacted LDC, who then took the next step, and then we sort of kind of moved through. But up until then, I'd never heard of Livingston before. I'd heard of Liverpool because I watched the football, but I'd never heard of Livingston ever in my life. So mum and dad had taken us through for a visit um, to the LDC, and then they'd taken us up to this house in Lindsay Avenue, which was going to turn out to be our next destination. But we didn't know anything about it at the time, so um, it was a hop, skip, and a jump, and we ended up in Livingston in February 1980.
So in because we were talking, Mike, before we started recording, the only thing that you knew about Livingston or had heard about Livingston was the when the aliens invaded in 1979.
Well, that's right. That was the only thing that had come on the radar. On I think I was saying to you earlier, it was a program called Nationwide, which was a sort of magazine program, I guess, of the BBC at the time, and they put a piece in the program to say this had happened. And I remember watching it and thinking, not thinking anything of it, just thinking, oh, but since it was Robert Taylor and Bob Taylor for Livy Station, which where we lived through Dean's was really a suburb of Livy Station. They sort of put that on as an add-on, and then you had all the locals from down there saying, "Well, you're not really a local. You must have had it yourself." You know
Yeah,
what I
yeah.
mean? And even though my parents have been, well, my mum and dad sadly passed away a couple of years ago, but 1980, 42 years, you're still treated as an incomer with a smile on their face when they say that to you, of course. But
Yeah.
um, they still had that sort of village mentality. I think, if you don't mind me saying that, I don't mean that in a negative kind of way. I just mean that in an objective kind of way. But yeah, but it was good. Livingston's been good for the Porters, for me, my brothers Scott and Alan. It's been a very very positive place, and it's moving here changed the direction of our life in a way that we're just grateful for. We're just really grateful for.
So that must have been quite tough for you if you were nearly finishing high school, because you at that age, 15, you're quite an impressionable age. Friendship is very important to us, and education is important. How did
Yeah.
you adapt? Did you not think I want to stay in Clydebank?
Well, no, I didn't. I think, of course, it wasn't sort of like we have now with Facebook and all the social media platforms. Um, but I've always, I mean, the friends that I had in Clydebank, I still have them. Even to this day, I've got some friends that I went to primary school with and worked delivering milk who've been my lifelong friends, and I still see them and speak to them on a regular basis. So I don't know how I managed to make that happen, but kind of I think time lapsed a little bit, and then I met up with them again. So but it was, you're right, it was a crucial time. Um, Being 15, turning over to 16, and leaving school. But I don't. I've never dwelled on that, to be honest with you. I think
Yeah,
your attitude to life is more important than your aptitude. Do you know what I mean? I think
yeah.
your hunger and your desire to learn new things and meet new people and be a good person are far more. And they don't teach you that at school. Everything's very academic at school, and I totally get that. But I don't think academia was really for me.
Yeah.
And I've read lots and lots of different things about people who are maybe had the similar kind of journey. So being successful and doing well in your life has got nothing to do with, or very little to do with academia, common sense,
Yeah.
and having good. I think having good family and good parents who bring you up the right way are of more importance than anything you'll learn at school. And
Yeah.
don't you agree? What do you think?
Yeah, no, I agree. It's life is what you make of it, really. You've got to take things by the bull by the horn and roll with life. I think
Mm,
when we were living there and when you moved there, And it's only in later life you realise that all new towns are built in 3 stages. So you build the houses, you get people there, you
Yeah,
find them jobs. So when you moved there and when we moved there, we were between stage 1 and stage 2, where they were building houses and getting people there. So unemployment was quite high, bearing in mind it was also the beginning of the Thatcher years with, the industries being attacked and
yeah,
closed down. So in that sense, it was quite a difficult time to be around because, like I said, you're in an environment where a lot of people were signing on, you know. So and there wasn't an employment, there was Cameron's and British Leyland closed in '79, So there were industries that were struggling. So it you had to make your own look, I suppose.
yeah. I think the sort of the deindustrialisation of Scotland at the time, or the UK, not just Scotland, and the Thatcher kind of way of just cleaning everything out. British Steel was going to come next, and then it was going to be the miners. When you look at the reflection, look at it historically, you'll see and it was all union driven as well. But it wasn't just British Leyland; it was all the little businesses that supported British Leyland. Who made different things for the big place in Bathgate, and that was a huge site. But that made no difference to us when we came because my dad had come from Singer sewing machine factory. At its peak, they had 16,000 people working there every day,
Wow.
and then they also had another 20,000 working down at the shipyards. So each day they would let the shipyards out half an hour early before the the sewing machine factory, so that the main streets weren't too congested. And
Yeah.
it was like being at school. They let you out with a whistle. You know what I mean? It's like and that was your
Yeah.
time to go home.
Yeah.
But when we came here, and the way things were, I ended up going to Bathgate College and Bathgate Tech,
Yeah.
and done a 2 year course in catering to become a chef, which was I didn't know what I wanted to do, but my mother, God bless her, she had decided that I was going to be a chef, and that was it. And it was the best thing ever because it led me into so many different avenues in the catering trade, and worked with amazing people. Worked in Edinburgh, coming from Clydebank, Glasgow side. I would never have had that if I was in the Clydebank because we had Edinburgh on our doorstep, and Edinburgh has and still has the best restaurant scene in Scotland. It's got
Yeah.
a great reputation and a great collection of independent restaurants, and it's always been known as a sort of culinary city. So I'd worked there, worked really, really hard. In fact, my first wage slip, I was working in an Italian restaurant called Raffaelli's in the West End,
Yeah.
just down from Fraser's, where
Yeah.
Fraser's
Yeah.
was, just at
Yeah.
the top of Princes Street.
Yeah.
And this was a really posh restaurant, and my first wage slip, I used to get £280 a month,
Yeah.
and I used to have to get the 201 or the 281 bus in from Dean's. You remember those bus
Yeah.
numbers,
Yeah.
Joe?
Yeah.
And in Livingston before they built the train station. And because I was on a split shift,
Yeah.
I couldn't go home in the afternoon because it was too long a journey. So what I would do in the afternoon is I would finish at 2:30, 2:45, and I would walk down Princes Street and I would get into Virgin Records, and I would go into HMV. Wasn't there at the time, but there was great independent record stores up in Coburn Street,
There
and there was
was
a
one sec, George. There was a HMV at St James's Centre.
yeah, there was an HMV at St James's Centre, but
Yeah.
it was just. I remember when Virgin Records was there, and they had a couple of stores there, but the first one was really stuck out in my head,
Yeah.
and I always went there in the afternoon. And I spent all my money on vinyl, which I've still got. If I was to walk through there, I would bring out a bit of vinyl that I bought there. I remember buying. Do you remember the Blue Nile?
Yeah,
The Scottish band, the Blue Nile. So I bought the Blue Nile, Walk Across the Rooftops in there for
yeah,
£3.99, and I've still got the cover that I've kept. I just slit the side of it like you do, and it's still
yeah,
got Virgin Records, £3.99, the Blue Nile, Walk Across the Rooftops. So that's how I spent my afternoons. I spent my afternoons trolling through record shops.
yeah,
I went down to St James's Centre to the HMV, but I never found it to be a place that I would want to go. I would
yeah,
always walk further down. There was a second-hand record store there that was just still there at the top of Leith Walk in Elm Row called Vinyl
yeah,
Villains, selling second-hand stuff. So I would
yeah,
always go there.
yeah. See, when I moved there, 78, so I was 11. The first thing that hit me was kind of like almost everybody of my age and older, or teenagers, were all into punk rock. And
Yeah,
that was the first thing that hit me, and it's kind of like, because I suppose I'm a bit of an alien, fitting in with the community that I'm involved in. So during the year before I went to the high school, you slowly you get pulled into I suppose liking punk. But by the
acclimatized, I think it's the word,
finest
isn't it?
days, yeah. Well, it's social conditioning, yeah.
Yeah,
We're
yeah, of course.
social creatures, and
Yeah,
we react to social situation, and Livingston to this day still has quite a renowned punk scene, where people seem to have held on to it, maybe a lot longer than certainly places in England. Uh, and it's for me, Edinburgh, since you were talking about Edinburgh, had such a great array of different record shops, which you had Bruce's on Rose Street, you had Virgin Records when it was the smaller shop on Frederick Street, and then you had Listen Records over the road, which was a
yeah,
Glasgow shop from memory. And then on the high street, you had the other record shop, which was an amazing shop. So it was a great time for music. 78 to, or certainly the time I moved up there. So 78, or I lived in Livingston, so 78 to 83. The Virgin Megastore probably came 81, 82. And suddenly
yeah,
that was just like an amazing, a vast amount of records in one space, and t-shirts and merchandise. But
yeah.
when did you first? Because you must have become aware of music whilst you were in Clydebank. When
No,
did
it
music
was, but
hit you?
I think just I'll come back to that in a wee second. But it was quite interesting you mentioned that, because on Saturday, just there, Friday and Saturday, we went to see Simple Minds playing in Princess Street Gardens. And on Saturday, we'd went with Bruce Finlay, who owned Bruce's
Yeah,
record shops. I spent Saturday afternoon with him. We spent the whole day with him. Bruce is now, he's 79,
yeah,
and we had a Bruce's record shop in Clydebank. In fact,
yeah,
Bruce's Records in Clydebank was where I bought my first two albums. Um, so I used to go back to what you were saying there. I used to deliver milk to make some extra pocket money when I was at school in Clydebank for a couple of farmers, and
yeah,
I spent all my money in records every weekend. So I would go down to Bruce's and you'd get a red bag. It would say, "I found it at Bruce's."
yeah,
That was the sort of the logo on it. And he was telling us on Saturday that he actually stole that from an American record shop in I don't know if it was in LA or something. I can't remember. It was Detroit. But he just said, "I found it at Rules" or whatever. So he just changed it and put it to Bruce's because he thought it would be really cool, a bit of plagiarism,
yeah,
and it worked really well.
yeah.
Um, and he decided he opened up in Dundee and Dunfermline and
Falkirk.
Clydebank and East Kilbride and Falkirk.
Yeah,
It started in Falkirk
yeah,
because
yeah,
his story's amazing. His
yeah, yeah,
story's actually it's actually an amazing story. But I was always into music. My dad was a singer in a band back in the late 50s and 60s,
yeah.
and there was always music in the house. So mum and dad had one of these sort of the big record players, the big things that looked like a monument that would stand in the living room,
yeah,
with the doors, sliding doors on it, and the radio, tune into Radio Luxembourg and all that kind of stuff.
yeah.
And they always had their own records, and so there was music in the house all the time. And that's kind of where it comes from, I think, and I don't actually know where does it come from, Will? Where does your music, where does that come from?
Yeah, I think a lot of it you are conditioned into the people that you know and the communities that you're involved in. I my first records that I bought, which were bought in Sutton in Ashfield, just outside Mansfield, before we moved to Livingston, was '78, and it was Blondie Denis, the Scottish World Cup song, but not the Andy Cameron one, the Rod Stewart one. Like I said, I was quite excited about moving to Scotland, and I also bought Father Abraham
And the
uh,
Smurf,
and the Smurfs. Yeah, so it's kind of like I
yeah,
lose a bit of credibility with that, but I was 10 at the time, but that they were my first records. My first album was Tom Robinson band Power in the Darkness, and
nice, nice,
that was influenced by a friend, and then suddenly, because you don't have a lot of money when you're 11, 12, so you're 13, 14, you can't buy, certainly the amount of records that I've got lying about the house at the moment, so
yeah,
you had to be selective of what you hear. And for me, you know, because I've been talking about it the last couple of days, particularly because there was an article in the Guardian. Uh, for me, it's always been about listening to new music that I've never heard before. That's been the driving point from the age of 12. I wanted, even when I started, buying newspapers, where I made a choice between the NME or Sounds, and I preferred the NME because Sounds, because they were writing about punk bands, and I was just fascinated by these new bands that I could never hear at that point. That
yeah,
they all it was written words, some prose. I'd kind of like seeing this new band from Halifax or this band from Morden. It just kind of like I want to hear what they sound like, and that was the driving point very much to where I am now. That I want to hear new music, and it's kind of like that for me is still the most important thing about music. It is having listening to something you've never heard before and thinking, actually, that's
yeah.
great, you know.
But I think that's I actually wish that I had that amount of time to do that. Honestly, I really do, because I think that's where your journey starts. It starts off as a journey of discovery and excitement, and you're attracted, whether it's Father Abraham and the Smurfs, um, or whatever. I like your honesty about that, because I always slag my brother Alan,
Yeah,
because one summer trip we went down to Irvine, and to the Magnum Centre. I think it must have been in '78
yeah,
before we moved to Livingston. And as typical Scottish weather, it was pouring the rain during the summer holidays. And my dad had said to us, right, you can all buy a single from, I think it was from Boots the Chemist. And Boots
yeah,
the Chemist had like the top, had all these singles in there. No picture discs or anything like that. It was just bits of vinyl, And I can remember that Alan had bought the Smurfs. He wanted Father Abraham and the Smurfs. My brother Scott, I'm just trying to think what he bought, because I did remember, but I can't remember now. But mine was, I wanted Plastic Bear Punk, Sapin Pour Moi,
yeah,
which was in the charts at the time, which is
yeah,
still one of those records. It's really travelled well through time.
yeah,
It's not punk, but it's punk by numbers. You
yeah,
know,
yeah.
I think, do you know what I mean? It's like, it's not punk, but it's punk by numbers, in the way that I think he was Belgian as well. He wasn't even
It
French.
was, yeah,
Um,
Belgium.
and and it's still a great song. I just still love that kind of raw energy, and there's no the production of it's great, but it's very, very simple.
Yeah.
It's still if you put it on today, it still sounds brilliant. I think it, and do you know what? When I spoke to you the other day, and as a bit of sort of prep for this, I had a wee look back on certain things that happened in February 1980, and I had a look at the charts, and quite remarkable. The charts in February 1980 are quite remarkable by comparison to where they are today in terms of the diversity of the acts that were in the charts. Because number one was Kenny Rogers, Coward of the County.
Yeah.
There you go. And number two was the Specials, Too Much Too Young.
Yeah.
And then you had Boomtown Rats and Madness and Joe Jackson, the Pretenders and the Regents for that great song 17. New Music, The Selector, The Ramones, Kool and the Gang, Sheila B. Devotion, which is a sort of Nile Rodgers sort of production, isn't it? That's the
Yeah.
song Spacer.
Yeah.
The Buggles with Trevor Horn, Elvis Costello, The Tourist, Annie Lennox, John Fox were my favourite song, and the song that reminds me of Livingston, and my theme song for Livingston is John Fox's Underpass.
Yeah.
That's a song that that's the music that defines us moving to Livingston, or me moving to Livingston, is John Fox's Underpass. And before we connected tonight, I was playing it on a loop in the kitchen just to get it into my head. And it still sounds great. And then you had The Clash, London Calling, AC/DC, A Touch Too Much, The Beat, Stiff Little Fingers, Blondie, Atomic, The Police, Peter Gabriel's Games Without Frontiers, The Skids, Working for the Yankee Dollar, and that's it. So a lot of these artists and bands are still my favourite bands to this very day, and
Yeah.
that's how much an impression they've made on me.
Yeah.
And I've been to see them. I've been to see the majority of them. I never
Yeah.
got to see The Clash, but I've seen Blondie and Stiff Little Fingers, The Police, blah 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 blah. But music is mainstream music. It's not something I listen to anymore
Yeah.
because it it's nothing to do with the sort of new bands that are coming along. It's to do with, I guess, I don't know, the five big record companies in the world fucking shaping everything at the moment. And I'm just not interested in it. I'm interested in going and finding out things for myself, and they come to you naturally through whatever medium. Do you know what I mean, Rule?
Yeah. 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 I think it's, there's probably more new music coming out now, and it's definitely a difficult time for new bands to break through because of the cost of everything. But it's probably easier to get your music into the marketplace now than it was in 1980,
Yeah.
81. So
Yeah.
there's some negative sides, that the whole manufacturing decline, which has been my career over the past 25 years, it is quite saddening to see, because you could see how much money, labels or bands were making from certain things because of the units that we were pressing up. To have a look at where units are now, where sales are now. So that's a bit disheartening. To have a look at what bands acts can make from Spotify digital, it's really disheartening on what your return is from a sale or a listen. So you kind of like you then have to question, how can these bands make money from the music side on the long term, which is when the publishing side comes in, and trying to do as many gigs as possible. But even on obviously the last 2 years, there's not really been that many bands that have been able to play regular or build up an audience, and to this point where
Yeah.
it looks like people are a bit hesitant about going out, whether they haven't got enough money or whether they're concerned about other things. So that's a bit disheartening. But
Yeah, I think and it's a good point. It's a good few points you make there. But I do think that I went to see Simple Minds on Friday and Saturday night in Princess Street Gardens, and
yeah,
6,000 people each night. But it's an outdoor event, and with our tribute band that we have, the sort of club scene where it's indoor this year has been really it's been really challenging for the promoters to put
Yeah.
things on.
Yeah.
And unless you know, normally we would play at a venue in Glasgow called Oran Moor, which is in the West End, and
Yeah.
normally we would sell that out. We would do 400 or 500 people coming along to see us. And the last time it was nowhere near that. And I think it's just to do with confidence, and all the promoters are saying the same things. Maybe next year will be a bit better, but I do think there'll be, with the increase in fuel costs for heating your home will have an impact in everyone's spend, not just on going to see live music, but on going to buy clothes, going out to a restaurant,
Yeah.
spending on consumer other consumable items. It will just all be put into um, gas and electricity, which is going to be no good for the economy long term, because it means the rest of the economy is just going to not stagnate, but it's going to stall.
Yeah.
So it's important that they sort that out just for the whole economic thing. But hopefully, hopefully next year will be a bit better.
Yeah.
We personally we've done a lot of outdoor festivals this year up and down the country,
Yeah.
and they've been really busy. Um, and we've been sort of part of that festival. But next year we're starting off in January, and we're doing quite a few shows up and down the country, and indoor. So we'll just have to suck that and see and see how it turns out. But I hear what you're saying. I think running a record label and looking after bands is precarious, and I think I feel for anyone who's doing that, because if you're going to be a band and be successful, you have to be good live. You have to go out and work and create your own live following who are going to come along and see you no matter where you play
Yeah.
up and down the country, because your record sales are only part of the equation economically. And you need to be able to write great songs that people want to listen to, who will buy the songs, and also more importantly come and see you when you go on tour, because that's where you make your money. And
Yeah.
if you look at my band Simple Minds, my favourite band Simple Minds, they've toured their whole life. They were on tour, and while they were doing the tour, they were writing the next album. When they finished the tour, they would be into the studio and they'd record the album, and then be back out and tour again. So it's that treadmill, and that's what you have to do. I think, I don't know if you have to do it now with social media, but you have to be good live, and you have to perform well live, and sort of culture those potential fans.
Yeah. So going back, your dad was an inspiration for your singing. When did you start singing?
Um, well, you were in a band long before I was, Will, because what was your band called? Was it called On Parole?
Yeah, I was the man that did all the work. I was the Malcolm McLaren that did the Maverick work.
Yeah,
And
I can actually see, and I might be wrong in saying this, but I can see you with a yellow and brown striped jumper, a hoop jumper, a bit like Dennis the Menace,
yeah,
and a pair of
possibly. I think it was red and black from memory that my grandma had knitted
okay,
for me.
and a pair of monkey boots and tight trousers, maybe.
Yeah, yeah,
But that was a kind of look in Livingston. But I started my first band I was in was about 1983, and I met some boys from Bathgate.
yeah,
I'd never been in a band before, and all of a sudden I was in a band, and then we were doing all sorts of things. And from that moment on, I had the bug, and I'm 58 and I'm still doing it. I've been back
yeah,
and forward, but I've been doing this I've been doing a Simple Minded tribute for the last 14 years. I also have another band called Empires That Dance, which is a kind of recording project where we reimagine old Simple Minds songs, and put them out. We release them, and it's a kind of conceptual thing. We always make a video for them as well. And I'm heavily involved in it. That's something I really enjoy doing. You know,
Yeah.
taking a gem of an idea and then getting the artwork done for it, making a video, and then putting it out there and seeing how it goes. But I've also been doing writing and recording my own stuff, which has went really well. I've got another few songs coming out in the not too distant future. We've got a Simple Minds fan convention happening on October the 15th this year. We've got fans coming from all over the world, and I've kind of put that together with a friend of mine who's been not very well. He's recovering from cancer. He's in remission. But that is going to go ahead in October the 15th. And as I said, we've got people come from all over the world. So my main focus at the moment is delivering that successfully. And I've got another few gigs to do. I think I've got another 7, maybe 8 gigs to do, shows to do this year.
Yeah.
Starting in September the 10th. So yeah.
So what does Jim Kerr think of your version of him? If you've spoken to him about it.
Well, no, I've met him a few times, and he's been very complimentary, and he's always sort of rubber stamped what we do. I don't know. You would really need to ask him that. So I don't know. One of the things is I do this because I've got a stone in my shoe. I do it for my own enjoyment. I love the sort of catalogue of songs that Simple Minds have. I know them inside out because I've been following them since 1981. I went to see them there used to be a venue above the Playhouse in Edinburgh called the Nightclub.
Yeah, I know it
and I
well.
went to see them then in 1981, and I've been going to see them ever since. And I'm still going to see them. I seen them on Friday and Saturday night. So yeah, I've been doing Simple Minded for 14 years, and it's a labour of love. And we take it very, very seriously. We don't take ourselves seriously at all, but we take what we do, really seriously. If you want to, if anybody's going to come and pay 15 quid for a ticket or 20 quid for a ticket, whatever it is,
Yeah,
you need to be good. You need to be rehearsed. You need to be accurate. You need to be on the money. You need to turn up with enthusiasm and a smile on your face and enjoy what you're doing because people have paid money to come along and see you. So
yeah.
it's just a labour of love, really. Though.
Good luck with everything, George. Thank you very much for your time.
Yeah,
Hopefully
thank you.
speak
It's been lovely
soon.
speaking to you.
Likewise.